Okay, so in this lecture, I'm going to talk through some of the privacy issues that are faced by internet scale applications. So it sort of fits in with the legal issues, which I'm going to talk about next, and the security issues that I've just talked about. So they're kind of like three interrelated issues that you need to bear in mind when developing or working with internet scale applications. So privacy is a little bit of a subjective thing. I mean, some people don't really care about their privacy. They'll share anything online, post anything anywhere. Who cares? They just want to use the web, enjoy using the web, and they're not bothered about their privacy, whatever that means. Other people are like really sensitive and precious about their privacy. It's like an inalienable human right for them, and they get very upset, when people, are thought to be compromising their privacy in some ways. And the police, as we discussed in the last lecture, think that you don't need privacy if you've got nothing to hide. So, the webcam in the bedroom, monitored from the police station, if you've got nothing to hide, why should you care? They're just professionals doing their job and all that. So, a mixed bag of views depending on where you're coming from on the privacy issue. You can be completely private online if you want to. You can share no data, you don't create accounts, you don't use Facebook or Gmail. If you access web pages with Tor, no one knows who that you're actually looking at these web pages. And if you pay for everything with Bitcoin, then no one's going to know who actually paid for it, as long as you take certain precautions with that. So Tor is a software that's designed to enable people to have maximum privacy online. Because otherwise, if you just contact a normal web server, they can typically pull out your IP address, I think, with various limitations of that, and store data on your browser and all kinds of things. So they can know a lot about you if you just use a standard mechanism for accessing a server online. Whereas if you go through Tor, you can communicate much more anonymously, and Tor is used by journalists, freedom fighters, NGOs, etc. I think the Russian government offered some bounty for shutting it down because they didn't like all this anonymous communication. And Tor is sort of very simple, really, well, simple-ish. You've got a bunch of sort of whatever they're called, not sure what they're called, I'm not a Tor expert. You have like various Tor nodes, anyway, yeah, there we go, Tor nodes. A bunch of machines that's like the Tor network. And Alice wants to reach Bob through Tor. So instead of going directly to Bob, which would compromise her privacy, she goes to a Tor machine, and then this sets up some kind of random path through the other Tor machines, and then this request eventually gets to Bob. Now, all Bob knows is that this Tor node has contacted him with the HTTP request. He doesn't know the route that request took through the Tor network, and he doesn't know who it was that sent that request off originally. So this gives great privacy to Alice, because Bob can't find out who actually sent that request, and he can choose to respond to it or not, depending on how he feels. But obviously, there's no privacy protection on Tor if then Alice then sends off her date of birth to Bob and all the rest of it, and pictures of herself, in the garden to Bob through the Tor network. There's no privacy then. The only privacy is if Alice is making specific requests for information from Bob through Tor. So if you use Tor to access your Gmail account, there's no significant privacy gained by that. Then we have cash and credit cards. So with cash, you've got a high level of privacy, right? If you wear gloves, go into a shop, give them £10, and they're not filming you on their security camera, and they give you a can of Coke, whatever, then that's a completely anonymous transaction. Maybe you could wear a bag on your head or something, right? If you don't wear gloves, obviously you've got fingerprints on the cash, and it's no longer sort of private or anonymous. Whereas if you pay online for things using credit cards or PayPal or something like that, then potentially every purchase you make can be tracked, and your purchases online are no longer private. So, and this has disadvantages as well with credit cards, because if you have a cash security breach, then you're just losing a finite amount of money. Where a credit security breach, credit card or bank details or whatever, you can lose a lot more money, and you can also lose your personal data. So if you want anonymity or high level of privacy online, you can use Bitcoin, which we're going to talk about in a later lecture. It's like a cryptocurrency. You have computer power used to create new units of currency. It's not controlled by any government, and you pay for you carry out Bitcoin transactions using a public-private key combination, and that, as long as you use different private key combination for each transaction, there's no relationship that anyone can identify between the different transactions. I think it's sort of limited to some extent, but you could probably track, because you'd have to, there might be some limitations to privacy, but it's an awful lot more private than you get a credit card. And so here we have Silk Road emerging from this combination of technology. So it's an extremely private internet scale application. So it's using hidden services, which is sort of services running on Tor for the for the communications, for the website, whatever. And then you've got transactions in Bitcoin. In this case, Silk Road, it's a marketplace for illegal drugs, which is why they made it also private. But if you were a privacy advocate or a freedom fighter or whatever, you might want to use the same mechanisms to set up your own website. And this was eventually shut down by the American government, I think, but maybe there's other ones no doubt exist that have not been shut down. And so if you're keen on privacy, you could use these kind of Silk Road, these combination of Tor and Bitcoin, or Freenet, which I'm also going to talk about in a later lecture, to improve your privacy online. And from the point of view of your customers, it's a good idea to give them as much privacy as possible and minimize the amount of data you actually store and obtain about them, because that's going to increase their privacy. And if you have a security breach, as we're going to talk about in the next lecture, if you've got less data, there's less damage and less potential for being fined, or less damage, less reparations to the customer you need to make. So privacy in cloud storage. So as I said, cloud storage is a tricky one because if I use Amazon to store my customers' data, that data is being stored and managed by another company. Company could be badly run. There could be corrupt employees who are looking at all the data on the various servers. Or the company itself could be a bit dodgy. They could be mining my customers' data, obtaining information about them and sending them targeted emails, right? It could be invading their privacy in ways that they hadn't agreed to with me. It's also highly likely that cloud storage providers will give your customers' data to the government if the government asks for it. And they might do this without your knowledge. So if the government has a subpoena on Amazon for your customers' data, then they'll just give it to them. I'm guessing. I don't know the exact legal details here, but there's a very good chance Amazon will just give it to them. And the contract that you have with your cloud provider will clarify some of these issues about what will happen if the government has a subpoena and so on and so forth. If you can be bothered to work through the hundreds of pages or whatever, you might find that in there. So the level of privacy of internet applications varies. So Facebook and Gmail are notoriously low level. So Gmail is mining your emails in order to give you targeted ads. Facebook, has all this privacy mechanisms, but who can be bothered to read them or find out how they actually work? So typically, Facebook and Gmail have low levels of privacy, and that's fine, right? If I want to use these very handy software tools or online tools to do various things and look at pictures of cute cats or whatever, then great. As long as I agree to it, then no problem at all, right? It's privacy. A loss of privacy is only a problem if the person who loses that privacy has a problem with that or is not aware of that or something like that. But if I say, great, mine my customer data as much as you like, give me that handy email service and that fantastic social networking application, great, I don't care. So it's only a problem if you don't agree to it or don't know about it. So in order to let people know about the level of privacy and to ensure that they agree to it, we typically have these privacy policies, right? So commercial internet scale applications have these long lists of terms and conditions. Most people don't read it. So this is like an example of some game, I think, or some privacy policy, some terms and conditions contract that people happily sign without reading. And I think it's sold, they agreed to sell their immortal souls, as part of the terms and conditions. So people didn't bother reading it, and this just shows how little people bother in reading it. So even if they don't read it, at least you're covered as a company if someone complains that they lost their privacy as a result of using your services, because you can say, well, look, in the terms and conditions we explained all this as best we could. You read it. If we asked you to read it, and if you didn't read it, well, that's your problem. And when you write these things, you actually have to take into account the policy of the cloud service provider. If you're storing everything with Amazon, then your customers' data is potentially accessible by people at Amazon, and it's subject to their terms and conditions as well as your terms and conditions, and so you need to mention this somewhere. If they're going to give it to the government, you better mention that their data might be given to the government. So that's you know, so I talked about people who didn't really care about their privacy so much. They just sort of shared whatever they felt like sharing. You know, the embarrassing shots of them lying in the street drunk, all this kind of stuff. Who cares, right? You know, it's never going to get back to me. It's just this weird amorphous space of the internet, and you have to do some really complicated search to find that embarrassing picture. So most people don't really care about privacy because the information they share online is rarely brought into daily life. It's very rare that some data that you share online actually intersects with your daily life or your work life or this kind of stuff. But face recognition is getting better and better. And so as face recognition gets better and better, it's going to start invading your privacy on a daily basis, on a personal, real-time, physical basis, instead of just being some abstract thing that you have or don't have online. So with face recognition, you can link someone's face as they're sort of standing in front of you with all kinds of different data. You can link it with relationship status, place of work, more recent tweets, posts, mood, and so on and so forth. So if, for example, you take a picture of someone in the street, using face recognition, you can then link that picture with all this kind of stuff that you could scrape off the internet. So I could write a web crawler that crawled all of the online dating sites, for example, and pull off all of the faces of all the people, as well as some of their details, maybe some embarrassing facts about them or whatever. And then I could just write an app that takes a picture of that person and then displays, using face recognition, a matching algorithm, it can look for a picture of that person online and find and dig up all of the details about that person online. So this is an example of a Carnegie Mellon system, I think. They did this. They built a system that effectively linked faces in the wild with the online data that people share. And I think there's a more recent thing with a Russian social networking site. Some people built a clever face recognition matching system that enabled you to link a face in the wild, like a picture of someone's face, with all the data that they were sharing on a social networking site. I even proposed a project on this last year, but no one was interested, of like augmented reality, so that you could use augmented reality to match pictures of people as you sort of looked around using Google Cardboard or something like that, and then display, whether they were doctors, whether they were single, all kinds of dark stuff. So a demonstration example, right? Not necessarily an app you'd actually want to use necessarily. And I think there's even some stuff on police interested in doing this kind of stuff, right? So obviously it'd be great for the police if they had augmented reality glasses that would put little sort of markers on all of the criminals in the crowd so they could keep an extra special eye on them, this kind of stuff. So in the age of face recognition, your privacy, you're a bit stuffed as far as privacy goes if you do share things online. So you can give up on old-fashioned ideas. You can say, well, there's no privacy, I've got nothing to hide, I'll just live with it. Or a bunch of people who are especially concerned about their privacy have come up with all these clever ways of modifying your face so you can defeat recognition. So you've got like special makeup, you've got this like fancy cage you can wear on your face, you've got like special sort of LEDs with some kind of fancy goggles. So if you wear the makeup, the cage, or the LEDs, it's much harder for systems to recognize your face in the wild. So if the police had this augmented reality app and you were some kind of nefarious criminal, if you walked around looking like that, they wouldn't be able to recognize your face. I mean, they might pick you up for other reasons, but they wouldn't be able to recognize your face. Okay, so I've talked very briefly through some of the privacy issues that apply to internet scale applications. And next lecture, I'm going to talk about some of the legal issues that apply, which obviously intersect to some extent with both the security and the privacy issues.